Hello, everyone. This is Jason White, and welcome to our 11th ISO podcast. I'm joined via TeamSpeak by Alberto Ibañez. Alberto, how are you doing?
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Glad to be here for this fantastic podcast.
Yeah, this is actually a recap of a visit that I paid to Pittsburgh over the past week. And I'd never been to Pittsburgh before, but it's a gorgeous city. And I went to the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix and wanted to recap some of that. And I wanted to have Alberto on here because there's some items in here that he will definitely be interested in. So, with that, we both have the video here that we're going to watch and comment on. So, as soon as I say go, you can hit play.
Okay.
Three, two, one, go. So the main event was the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix, and that was a variety of stuff. Indy in the Park is what we're specifically looking at later on, but these are some of the cars coming through here for the vintage races. Categories that we're pretty familiar with, but there was such a wide variety of stuff, pretty much something for everybody. The track itself is in a park in Pittsburgh, and this whole event kind of had kind of a Goodwood / Concours d'Elegance feel to it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it had. I can see any curves. I just see those barriers that were provisionally put there. It seems very scenic, but probably also very dangerous. I don't know if they really raced there in anger.
No. I mean, this particular section here, this hairpin, had a sign that said no passing right before it. So, yeah, they're not expecting people to drive the cars in full-on anger. But there you see Pittsburgh, the downtown section, and this park is actually kind of up on a hill on the eastern side of the city.
Beautiful and very historic city.
Yeah, and there were so many people there. They estimated over the course of several weeks that they were having this event, there would be 200,000 people. And there is, like I said, something for everyone. You want MGs? We got your MGs. The open wheel kind with the fenders, and then, of course, Jaguars. There were plenty of those. Just basically, a lot of English vehicles here.
Lots
I
of
have
love for English cars there. Yeah, you see some Triumphs, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, the TR6. There were just rows and rows of TR6s, which was really great to see. I know a lot of people who are very passionate about them.
All of them in a very beautiful condition. They
Yeah.
really shine.
Land Rover is also there. Lots of Defenders. And the French cars were present as well. I know that Richard Coxon may not share my enthusiasm for these cars, but this is a very gorgeous DS Citroën.
Very personal design, very innovative car back then.
Yeah.
And back there, I see that's a Citroën 6.
That is I believe a Traction Avant is another name for it. And then you look inside, of course, the iconic single-spoke steering wheel. This is another DS that has the quad lamps, and I'm assuming that this is because it was built for a market that did not have, that could not have the other type of lamp where it has the lens. These are the cat eye DS.
These cars
sedans.
were nicknamed the Shark here in Spain.
The Shark in Spain. That's interesting because the other nickname I've heard for them is the Goddess.
Okay.
Yeah, but a very unique car. A car that you don't get to see very often stateside. This is, if you see any of these, it's just looks like aliens have landed. There again with a single spoke wheel and that very odd shifter on the very top of the stalk. Lotus was also very well represented here. And this is an extremely early Lotus 7 with bare metal. This just looks so cool.
Absolutely. Really very competition-like. Although this is probably just a track day car.
I am fairly certain it is intended for track day and not for going to the grocery store. That is for sure.
Even if you have the space there behind.
Volkswagen had a display for their new cars, but they also brought this old Formula V car. It's a Lola, and seemed like it was in good shape. It didn't do any laps, though. It was just there for display.
We've raced these too. Virtually.
And I was having a hard time finding the Indy cars, but I finally found them at the corner of Serpentine Drive and East Circuit Road. And here they are, all lined up. There were 10 in total.
Beautiful.
Yeah. These guys travel to a bunch of different places, and bring a wide variety of Indy cars here, and this is their little paddock that they put together. I actually spotted a couple of people that we idolize, Alan Sir Jr. and Chip Ganassi. Here is probably the crown jewel of the collection, the Dan Gurney All-American Racers Olsenite Eagle, which was piloted by Uncle Bobby in 1972, won the pole position for the 72 race. Unfortunately, did not finish that race. Driven at this event by Philippe de L'Espinay, who you tell me actually designed the livery for this car.
Yes, he did. He designed that and several other liveries back in the 70s for Dan Gurney.
There's a close-up showing the chief mechanic Wayne Leary and the driver Bobby Unser, Ozzie Olsen owning the car. They had a special sticker on there commemorating Bobby Unser, obviously, who passed away recently. And just the level of detail in this Offenhauser motor with all the Aeroquip tubes and everything, it was just incredible to be this close to this stuff.
Yeah, I've got some very interesting stories about this specific car that we might talk about later.
But yeah, at one point here, they pulled off the panels and they were doing a check to make sure that the car was fit and ready to go around the circuit.
That's Philippe there with the cup. That's the owner, the one who restored this car.
Yeah. And he also drives the car, correct?
Yeah, he does. He has actually a license as a pilot.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, he's qualified to drive cars in all kind of road courses. And I've seen photos of him. He was also a dedicated motorcycle racer back in the day.
So this is them just idling the motor, making sure that everything is all set and ready to go. And I really wish I could convey to you how much fun it was to stand next to this thing with the heat coming off of the Offenhauser.
But you have no idea how jealous I am right now.
And the smell of the alcohol fuel. It was great. They had it running for a good 5 minutes or so, just making sure that everything was up to snuff before they took it around. Of course, the circuit itself was right and left-hand turns, so they weren't doing anything too crazy with these cars, but they were basically doing concours laps. But it was really great to see this historic car there.
Yeah, I know for a fact from Felipe that even in the minimum boost setting, this thing is producing 700 horsepower at the wheels. So it must have been really, really something. Well, you need to be very careful in this small track to drive this thing around, even if you're just parading it. Also with a big turbo lag.
Yeah, it was. Someone actually asked Philippe, "What's the horsepower of this?" And he just calmly looked at him and said, "4 figures." And there's Uncle Bobby's office, complete with the eagle throw pillow on the steering wheel, which I always thought was funny. And there's the turbocharger assembly. It's a beautifully maintained car, and the level of detail here is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
That little box there, I'm not sure what that's for. That it's open. It looks like it could carry a battery. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, this car designed by Roman Slobodinsky, and a car that really, I mean, this was probably one of the most important Indy cars of the 70s, if not the most important one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's iconic to remember the 70s with these cars. They basically dominated or were very competitive until the mid-70s.
This is another car that we're familiar with. This is a Lightning, and this is the car that Steve Krisoloff drove in 1979, sponsored by Frosty Acres. I assume that's ice cream. And this was a Fletcher racing team car. Now, it's not precisely the same way as it was back then, I believe, because this looks to be a stock block engine that it's running.
Yeah, that's something that was very usually done to these cars later to be able to keep them on the track, because the problem of maintaining and keeping on track cars that have an historic V8, a historic Cosworth, well, you have parts problems, you have maintenance problems, and those are engines that are very edgy. So for multiple track use, track days and shows, the stock block is the favorite choice for many of these restorations.
Mm-hmm. And you can see there from that gray elliptical sticker that it has been to Goodwood. Nice car, and of course, this was the customer car of the late 70s. Kind of took over from where the Eagle was the customer car, previous one. This is a Penske that was built in Poole, England, and later on used by privateers after Penske had moved on and built newer cars. This particular car is in the livery and configuration that it raced in 1981 with Tom Bigelow, and there he is with the car. This car also had a lot of signatures in the rear wing. You can see Pancho Carter's signature there, Tom Bigelow in the middle there with a little cartoon in the middle of it. I can't make out most of the rest of these people, but I'm sure they all had something to do with, if not this car, then the series. Sponsored by Genesee Beer, this car. And it's rare to see a Penske that was actually driven by a privateer. Usually they stayed in the hands of Roger, but this one in that case did. Now, here's a car that everybody loves. The doorstop Lotus turbine from 1968. This is the car that was driven by Joe Leonard, and which unfortunately failed on him before the end of the race. I wish that these photos and video could convey the color of this car. You really have to be standing next to one of these STP orange cars to get the full effect of this orange day-glow paint. It just sears into your retinas. It
And this very peculiar and flowing shape. I mean, is this actually a big car when you stand next to it?
No, it's surprisingly small. It is a very, very compact car. And the bonus was seeing it going around the track and listening to the sound of it. It sounds like an airplane is coming by.
Well, it is. It's after all a helicopter turbine that is hiding there.
Yeah. But such a gorgeous car, so simple and straightforward. Now, this is a 1956 Novi Vespa special that used to be driven by Paul Russo. Now, this car did not go around the track, unfortunately, and I really wish it had, because if it's a Novi engine, and nothing, and I mean nothing, sounds as good as a Novi engine. I love the Offenhauser gurgle, but the Novi sound, there's nothing like it. And for whatever reason, this car didn't go around the track that day. Maybe it went around the next day. But there it was in the lot. The Novi, for those of you who don't know, is an engine that was built in Michigan. Really strong, powerful, had a following at the Speedway, but never really had much success, unfortunately.
Must be a real headache to find parts for that engine nowadays.
Oh,
to
I'm
keep the
sure.
maintenance of this car,
I'm sure.
which shows the dedication of the owners.
I love the shape of these cars. And the other thing about these roadsters of the era, they're just completely asymmetrical. There's nothing symmetrical on these cars at all.
That's actually the transmission tunnel there on the left, if I'm not mistaken, and the engine was tilted to the opposite way.
And right next to it, here is an A.J. Foyt. I believe this is a replica of the car that he won the 64 500 in. This is not the actual one. There's little things where I'm like, yeah, this is reproduction. But in any case, beautiful car. Once again, a roadster. Sheraton Thompson special. And this one was driven around the track at a decent pace. Very fun to look at up close.
Solid front axle for these cars.
Yeah. Now this one for sure I know is a tribute car. This is a tribute for Parnelli Jones' car that he drove in 1963, I believe, number 98. And it's funny that, you know, we typically don't think of these cars coming into contact with each other, but there's that bar that goes around. I mean, these cars were just built like iron. They did not, this was prior to the era of cars deforming or a deformable structure and taking part of the energy with them in an impact. That car is really solid instead. And there is a car that Hurtubise drove, the number 56. So it was really cool that we had the roadsters and the more modern Indy cars at this particular event. This was the car that they used to pace them around the track, and it was driven by none other than Alan Sir Jr.
Well,
yeah, he was there, and so was Chip Ganassi. Chip Ganassi took one of his relatives, I believe, around the track at speed, and we heard wheels squealing. And eventually it was time to grab the starters and take them out onto the track. Here's the replica Parnelli car coming out. I really wonder, Alberto, what you have to do to get to the point where you're driving one of these in a meet like this.
You have to be in those circles
Yep.
and really be very much in touch with these people. But from the age of many of the people here, you can see that many of them probably have a history together. They've been owning these cars, maintaining them, and talking among them for years and years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thankfully they did more than just one lap. Yep, here they come around with the Mini in front, and there you can hear the turbine. Offenhauser gurgle. It's strange to have these vehicles at a place like the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix, but everybody was really thrilled to have them there.
Yeah, it's a bit like Goodwood, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yep.
it's a place where you wouldn't expect to see these kind of cars, but in Goodwood, everybody's already used to it, so they are basically parading. So
Yeah. Yeah, and everybody was up on a hill here. I love this car so much. And the turbine. That thing's nuts.
it's four-wheel drive too.
Yeah, that's true. Penske. It was a beautiful day too. I'm told that the next day wasn't quite as beautiful. I was only there on the Saturday, but there we have a look at the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix and Indy in the Park. It was a really fun time and a great chance to get up close to those vehicles.
Well, right after you saw so many historic vehicles in the museum at Indianapolis, but they were
Mm-hmm.
static. It must have been really nice to have been able to see many of them moving, and because in these cars the sound is so important. I mean, you really have to stand next to them to understand the magic of the sound of these cars.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was like that. This particular group, Vintage Indy, they spend a lot of time and effort making sure these cars can run. And their shop has a bunch more cars. Like, for example, I know they have the number 71 Rick Mears car from 1978. They have that car specifically. They have a bunch of other cars that they're constantly working on. So it's a labor of love for them for sure. And it's because of their efforts that we can see these cars out on the road, or not on the road, at a circuit, at a meet like that.
Mhm.
They're actually going to Nashville as well.
Okay.
Hmm.
So yeah, many of these guys were actually running these cars when they were young as mechanics or as Philippe Delespina as designers and also as a mechanic. And there are very, very interesting stories about them because it seems that after the time has passed and many of them have retired, that they have basically decided to dedicate their lives to bring these cars back to life. And it's only good because they remember what these cars were about, and probably not many people today are qualified to actually maintain them and to run them.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. And you know, I think it's super cool that people like Alan Jr. and Chip Ganassi are involved as well because they obviously they see the benefit of not only of preserving the past, but it's also they're being ambassadors for the sport as it stands right now as well. So it's definitely it's a great venture for all concerned.
And just to put things in perspective, for example, some things I can tell you about the car from Philippe Delespine, the number 6 Eagle.
Yeah.
That's actually a car that wasn't, that's not an original car that was built back then and that was driven by one of the
Oh.
drivers of the era. It's the history of that car is very interesting because what happens here is in the 80s, Philippe de Lespinae contacted Dan Gurney because Dan Gurney wanted to basically have one car built from the parts that he had still lying around and some of the chassis that had an actual chassis number because he wanted one of those historic cars on display for his
Hmm.
private museum. And so what happened was that the Spinai basically proposed to Dan that they could build two cars actually, and they did build two of them. And one of them is now in the Dan Gurney's museum, and it was repainted as the Mystery Eagle. That's the one that had the purple livery, and
Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
one that was driven by Jerry Grant. And the other car is this one that belongs to Philippe de Lespinay, and that was built using actually the motor that this car has was actually the same Offenhauser engine that Bobby Unser used to win the California 500 in 1974.
Wow.
So that part of it is absolutely historical. And of course, the rest of the parts come from the parts bin from Dan Gurney, and the car was built basically creating the parts that were needed for it from scratch, and also for the transmission and much of that. And it's interesting because Philippe started the work on this car just sorting out the parts and classifying them and all that in 1987, and it took
Whoa.
him up to yes, many years until the cars were built. And there's Philippe has a blog, and there he explains many of the treats and of the histories with these cars, and some of them are really interesting. In 2012, this car, the number 6 Also Night Eagle, was taken out for the first time for a demonstration at Auto Club Speedway. And none other than Bobby Unser was invited to drive it, and he did drive it, even if he was already quite of some age. I mean,
Hmm.
that was not so long ago. And there's a funny story that Lespinai told me. It's also in the blog, at least in part. And that's they were having some problems with the engine. It was running a bit rough, even if the specialists that had rebuilt it were around. And when Uncle Bobby arrived, he basically went there, greeted everybody. He was immediately, of course, the center of the show. But the first thing he did, he went to the car that was already warming up and started fiddling on it. And what happened was that he remembered, after all those years, the settings of the Hillborn injection system, and he immediately made the car run well.
Oh my goodness.
It was absolutely brilliant. I mean, everybody was delighted with that. And then he took the car to the track. Unfortunately, because of a problem in how the engine had been rebuilt, there was a gremlin hiding there, and the engine actually blew up.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, they couldn't complete all the laps that they wanted, but it was rebuilt eventually. And then in 2014, it was again taken out to the track, and that's there. There's also footage from that, and from then on, it has been running absolutely solid as a rock. The car, when it's not displayed elsewhere, can be seen in the Riverside Museum. That's its home now.
Okay. Yeah. So the livery is 1972 vintage, but it's actually a brand new, well, not a brand new car, but built from leftover parts. I
Yeah,
see.
parts that were
Yeah.
actually
Gotcha.
created back then,
Hmm.
because they were intended to be as obviously spare parts for the cars that were broken. So even the parts, except some mechanical ones that had to be mechanized or sourced out as new, even the parts were actually created in the 70s. It's
Mm.
just that they were not mounted on any car. The chassis is also original, though. I mean, the car was commissioned by Gurney, as I said, using two chassis that were left there, that had a number actually. So the car is in that regard historic, but those chassis were never assembled to make a complete new car with them. Maybe they were conceived as a spare, or maybe they, I don't know, they were for some cars that the car was no longer usable. I mean, it had been actually it become outdated by the time that they could make use of it. So, and they had moved on to other models.
Mm. That does help explain one anachronism with the car that I always wondered about, because if it's 1972, it doesn't have the wide wing in the back. It actually has a much smaller wing. So, there you go. It is definitely a parts car. That helps to explain why that is. But yeah, it was obviously the crown jewel. Well, I don't know that you could say it was the crown jewel of that display, because there were so many other great cars like the Turbine and the Foyt car and the Parnelli tribute car. I mean, I don't know. It was just such a great collection. If any of you who are watching this have a chance to go to one of the events that they go to, by all means go there. They also have a shop in Indianapolis where they work on and restore these cars.
And I think they also take them to the one very important event, which is the Historics at Monterrey. which they do in Laguna Seca. That's also beautiful, and that's the home of many of these cars because many of them are based actually in California, in the museums there.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for watching the video with me, Alberto. I'm sure that you found that to be interesting. I wish that we could have teleported you out there, but hopefully, those cars sometimes make trips to Europe. Maybe sometime you can go to Goodwood and see them if they're actually there.
I know that the STP Eagles, for example, have been up there at Goodwood. I'm sure
Oh,
of that,
cool.
and I think that also the Mark Donoghue Eagle example, which is also one of the surviving ones, has been there to Goodwood. So I plan to go there 1 year, and hopefully I can see them in the flesh because I'm dying to do that. But if not, I hope that one day I will be able to travel to Indianapolis and then maybe see them at the museum at least.
Oh no, yeah. If you come over here, you and I are going to that museum. I know that the Donahue Eagle is there right now. It resides at the museum. It's on the main floor right now in the old replica garage right now. But it also I'm sure they rotate it, up into the display and down again. But at least that's where it is right now. So that's its home for the moment. Well, before we close out the podcast, I thought it might be nice if we just really quickly recap where we are with championships because we're not going to be racing again for another month because we've got all this time to ourselves to recharge and recuperate. You're going to Alcoy, much deserved time off, and I wish I could. I wish I could be enjoying that Spanish sunshine as well, but
You're welcome anytime here.
yeah,
You've been
I know.
already there, and I really look forward to this holiday break because I think we do need it.
We do. We really do. So, just to recap where we are right now, the F1 Championship, we just finished uh, the last round at the Österreich Ring, and Wilkes is in the lead with 51 points. Juha Boss is in second with 38 points. And then there's a three-way tie for third between Grant Radal, Anders Nilsson, and Gabriel Del Piccolo. Gabriel has been on a hot streak, Alberto. Do you think that he's going to be able to continue that hot streak when we get back?
Even if he was very cautious when we asked him about it, I have no doubts that Monza is going to be a place where the Benetton is going to shine and Gabriele will be extra motivated because it's his home race. Then we will be going to Portugal, to Estoril, and that's also a place where the configuration of the circuit is going to suit the Benetton very well. And then the same is going to happen in the next round in Mexico. So I think that Gabriele is going to make a late championship charge that is going to be very interesting. And I can imagine that David Jakes, who is now out of chances in the championship, is going to absolutely back up his teammate and they are going to work together. So it wouldn't surprise me much if we see things going down to the wire in Adelaide in this championship.
Also, looking at the Constructors' Championship, JPS Team Lotus has 63 points and is in the lead. Benetton Formula is second with 55 points. Scuderia Ferrari is in third with 50 points. Marlboro McLaren is in fourth with 44 points. And then Equipe Ligier is in fifth with 39 points. So it'll be interesting to see if JPS Team Lotus can make it a Lotus double championship for the driver and the constructor. But we haven't even talked about drop scores yet, and you really won't know what's going to happen with that until the end, will you?
Yeah, that's the interesting part of this championship because the drop scores play a big role here. I
Hmm.
mean, you can see people that probably have been very consistent over the championship and they have very similar points, very similar scores in several races, and all of a sudden they have to drop five of them. This obviously favors the people who are irregular, but when they do a good score, they score high.
Hmm.
So I can imagine that this is going, for example, to be something that benefits especially people like Grant Ridal and the like, maybe even also Gabriele Del Piccolo. Whereas Wilkes, no matter if he is the leader in the championship, we all know that he has won some races, but he has many good results, many top five results, but five of them are going to be scratched out. So imagine what happens because for some people, a scratched out result is one where he got 0 points. But for Wilkes, a scratched out result might easily be something where he got 3 or 4 points.
Hmm. Moving on to the 1978 Usac City Corp Cup National Championship, David Jakes is in the lead with 2,928 points. Yours truly is in second with 2,476 points. Adam Hackman, my teammate, is in third, 2,366 points. Brian Janik, who's driven nothing but one-off drives, I might add, is in fourth place with 2,248 points. And then Cesarius is in fifth with 1,932 points. I don't have to tell you what's going to be a big tipping point for this series, Ontario, which I believe is coming up soon after we get back. Or I think it's a couple of rounds after we get back. But definitely this is going to be an interesting championship, and it's totally wide open still.
Yeah, absolutely. At Ontario, there are no less than 1,000 points on play, and that means that whoever wins it is going to either be well positioned to basically finish the championship there, if he was already in the lead or with a high amount of points like Jakes or you, or he will be all of a sudden in the championship fight. It's a shame that Cesarius had that problem, that disco at Pocono, where he was actually leading. But considering how well he's going in the 500 milers and that his car seems to be really flying there, I would expect him to really score well there and bring also this championship to the wire.
Yeah, no question about it. Then we also have the Deutsche Rennsport Meisterschaft Group C standings right now. We're going to have a race right when we come back, I believe. It's one of the first ones we have in September. David Yunt is in the lead with 70 points. David Jakes in second with 57. Mikey Grem's in third with 35. Juha is in fourth with 34. And your son, Alberto Aquino, is in fifth with 20 points. There's only 2 rounds to go in this championship. Do you think anybody can catch David Yunt?
It's going to be hard, not just because the races are hard and because there is a good amount of luck involved, but because Jant is a very accomplished anti-brass racer. I think that's where he excels. He's a very smart driver. And if he was back for whatever reason, because he had problems in previous races or whatever, I would say that he's still a championship candidate. But being in the lead, that makes it very, very tough to beat him. So unless he has unexpected problems and does not finish in some of the races, I think that it's going to be very hard to beat him.
Speaking of hard to beat, then you go to the Group B standings for the same championship, and Cesarius is just running away with it. He's got 60 points. Brad Salmon is in second with 47. David Saber in third with 44. August Watrick in fourth Watring in fourth with 25 points, and then you have Jonathan Asserklint in fifth with 22. Schlapinski just absolutely loves this BMW M1, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. And he had an abandonment and retirement in the last race. And it's a shame that Brad Salmon is not able to continue racing this championship because he was actually in a very good position to challenge Cesarius.
Yeah. And then we have one other championship right now, and that is the Lucasfiedro Trophy. Cesarius leads with 55 points. Adam Hackman's in second with 36. I'm in third with 30. Brian Janik in fourth with 28. And Anders Nilsson is in fifth with 23. Of course, this is a series that emphasizes a variety of races, so we'll see what's going to come up next. It's not really clear what we're going to be racing, but
we will be doing in this championship. We already announced it at the beginning of the year, the famous World Cup for touring cars that took place in Paul Ricard. So we'll see, because it's interesting now to see all those drivers paired in cars that are actually very similar to each other and that are quite different from what they are driving the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
Super tourers.
Yes. All right. Well, that's what we have to look forward to from September onwards. Alberto, thanks so much for making the time to recap the Pittsburgh Vintage Grand Prix in Indy in the Park. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was really great fun to see the video, to watch the video with you.
Oh, thanks. All right. So with that, this is Jason White, and for Alberto Ibañez, so long from this latest podcast. We'll see you on our next podcast, and hopefully on the track from September onwards. Take care and be safe.